a quick video to talk about cumulative frequency and cumulative frequency graphs. So you have this paper and your job is to follow along with the video, pause where needed to do some work, and fill it out. So we have this investigation. The data below shows the number of times that 50 students have lost a pencil this week, and then it lists all this data. So the first thing I want you to do is construct a frequency table for the data. So you'll look through all of the data and you'll figure out, okay, how many times there were 0 pencils that were lost, and if I count the data, that happens 1 time. Then I can go to how many times 1 pencil was lost, and if I count the data, that was also done 1 time. So you'll go through the rest of the data, keeping track of losing 2 pencils, 3 pencils, 4 pencils, etc., all the way up to 10 pencils. Once you have your data, then you'll fill in the other columns, the relative frequency, the cumulative frequency, and the relative cumulative frequency. So remember, relative frequency is just the proportion. So it's the number of times out of the total. So relative frequency for 0 pencils lost is going to be 1 out of 50. But we're going to put it in decimal form. So that's going to equal 0.02 for us. And then obviously it's the same value in the next column. So go ahead and pause the video here and work out the rest of column A, B, and C. Now that you have columns A, B, and C all filled in, we're going to talk about the cumulative frequency. So cumulative frequency is just the subsequent adding of the frequencies. So make note that column D is related to column B because cumulative frequency is just going to be the sum of each of the previous frequencies. So in this case, the first frequency is 1, so 0 plus 1 is 1 because that's where we start. Then we're going to add the next row. There was 1 pencil lost 1 time. So when we add 1 to 1, we get 2. In the next row, we'll add our next frequency and get the next value, and that'll proceed down our chart. Relative cumulative frequency is the same process, but it's just with the relative frequency. So column E and column C are related to each other. So in this case, for the relative cumulative frequency, I'm going to start with 0.02 because that's what I start with in this row. And then I'll add the next row. So 0.02 plus 0.02 is 0.04. And then I'll continue to add all the way down the columns. For the cumulative frequency column, for column D, at the end, you should have 50, a total of 50, because that's how many students we were polling. And for column E, at the end, you should have a total of 1, because the relative cumulative frequency is going to add up to 100% or 1. So go ahead and pause the video and finish those 2 columns. All right, hopefully you did that work on your own, and you now have a table that looks like this. So take a moment, check to make sure that all of your values match. But you can see, for example, here in row 3, 3 pencils were lost 5 times. And if I do the relative frequency, that's 5 over 50 or 0.1. And if I then do my cumulative frequencies, I'm just continuing to add the previous value. So we started with 1, and then we're going to add another 1 to get 2. Then we add 2 from column B to get 4. Then we add 5 from column B to get 9. Then we add 6 from column B to get 15, etc. And the same thing is happening for our relative frequency, and we should get these values. All right, so what happens now is that we're going to graph all of that data. So we're going to use the x-axis is going to be the number of pencils, which you can see in this example down here. And your y-axis is going to be the cumulative frequency, which you can see in the example here. And then you'll plot the points. So get a piece of graph paper, and on my example, I used 2 boxes to represent 1 pencil, and then I used one box to represent 2 on my cumulative frequency chart. You can do it however you want, but this should be big enough on your piece of paper that you can identify some locations on it. So use a whole piece of graph paper. Take some time, pause the video, go ahead and get working on that. You'll end up with a bunch of dots that kind of look like this little curve. And then what you're going to do is you're going to join those dots with a smooth curve, so it'll eventually look like that. All right. Once you've done that, you can add, so this is number 6, you can add a separate percent scale to the right-hand side. So it goes vertically. Notice the top, so 50, wherever 50 is, that's going to be our 100%, because that was all of our data, right? Halfway in the middle would be 50% of our data. At the bottom is 0% of the data. Here at 25% of the data, what is another name for 25% of the data? Well, that's your quartile 1. What's another name for 50% of the data? That's your median. Then if we went to 75% of the data, that's your Q3. So you should end up with a graph that's bigger than that and nicer than that, that displays all of the data. Once you have your graph, go ahead and take a look at questions 4 and 5 and see if you can figure those out and bring your answers to class. Thanks.